Good morning, I'm Harley Schlanger from the LaRouche organization with your daily video update for June 22nd, 2023. In my weekly interview with Helga Zepp-LaRouche yesterday, she made a very interesting point, which is that with the emergence of a very strong anti-war thrust from former President Donald Trump and from Robert F. Kennedy Jr., we have the actual possibility of a real campaign this year. That is, that the 2024 presidential campaign can go beyond the usual partisan talking points and actually begin to get at the substance of what it's going to take to break out of the control which is putting us on the course toward World War III and global depression collapse. But it would be foolish to rely on these two candidates, both of whom have demonstrated some courage, but also some flaws and vulnerabilities. So the real question is, will we, the people, insist that this be a real campaign this time? Now, as I said, both Trump and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have launched forceful attacks on the establishment in the last couple of days on the war policy for Ukraine. Trump went after the war hawks in both parties, hitting at the Biden administration, but also the rhinos and the Republicans who continue to vote for billions of dollars of arms to be shipped to the kleptocrats of Ukraine. He spoke of the money and the greed of the military-industrial complex. He said, we have to stop the fighting, stop the war, stop the killing. And he also warned that we face a danger of nuclear war. Now, it's worth noting that he's far ahead of his Republican opponents, most of whom so far have been ardent supporters of continuing Biden's policy. In fact, they've criticized Biden for not going far enough. Now, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. gave a very forceful presentation 2 nights ago in which he took on the whole question of the Western narrative of the war in Ukraine. He said, are we fighting for Ukrainian freedom? No, we're not. He said the West, in fact, was the provocateur that provoked the Russians to move into Ukraine. He correctly identified what the purpose of the war was for President Biden, saying that for Biden, quote, the disabling and exhaustion of the Russian military and dismembering of the Russian Federation was the reason to continue this war, unquote. Like Trump, he warned of the danger of nuclear war. Now, what's especially interesting is that by blaming both parties, they're opening the door for full discussion of these issues. Now, Kennedy Jr. went further by identifying the alternative approach to foreign policy, the approach of his uncle, John F. Kennedy. And he gave the same reasons that we have made a central theme for months, the importance of listening to and learning from John F. Kennedy's June 10th, 1963 speech at American University. In particular, RFK Jr. spoke of the danger, John F. Kennedy spoke of the danger to civilization from nuclear war. And secondly, he asserted that both the Soviets and the United States had common interests. And by making those points, by emphasizing that, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was saying that this is why we have to have negotiations and discussions as opposed to creating straw men images of an enemy. And that's, of course, what Biden is doing. Biden is telling you Putin is brutal, Russians are barbaric. He attacked Xi Jinping as a dictator the day after Blinken had spent a half hour talking with Xi, trying to find some common ground to work together. So we see the present administration veering in a course toward escalated war and with no solutions for the economy. But it's important that both candidates have to go further and adopt Helga Zepp-LaRouche's call for a new security and development architecture. The U.S. could join with Russia and China, along with the nations of the global South, who have become the global majority. This change is already happening. there's a move toward what's sometimes labeled de-dollarization, which should actually be seen from the positive side, which is nations which want to use their national currencies and to strengthen their national currencies based on trade and investment in building up their physical economy, including infrastructure, heavy industry, new technologies in energy, water management, and so on. The use of national currencies for trade and investment was a theme that was brought up many, many years ago by Lyndon LaRouche when he began discussing a new Bretton Woods to replace the floating exchange rate system that came in after Nixon took the dollar off gold reserve in 1971. LaRouche, in fact, in the mid-1970s, was leading a decisive break internationally with the geopolitical doctrines of the British Empire, which were adopted by both Henry Kissinger for the Republicans and Zbigniew Brzezinski for the Democrats. Now, why does Helga Zepp-LaRouche believe it's time we can finally have a presidential campaign with serious discussion of issues? Well, first of all, this is what the establishment is deadly afraid of. And I'll just cite something, a New York Times op-ed by Bret Stephens, where he demonstrates in this op-ed the fear of the establishment that it's losing the control over the minds of the population, that even with the narrative control of hybrid warfare, of brainwashing, of day-to-day lying and censorship, despite that, there's a growing rebellion against the establishment policies. Here are some things that Stephens cites that show the panic emerging in this establishment. A recent Harris poll about the great wartime leader Joe Biden found the following. 66% of registered voters think he's too old. 59% have doubts about his mental fitness. 63% think the economy is on the wrong track. And if the election were today, the Harris poll found that Trump would have 45%, Biden 39%. So that's very telling in itself. The idea that more than two-thirds of the electorate thinks that Biden is too old and they doubt his mental fitness tells you something about the futility of the Democrats trying to prop him up for another 15, 16, 17 months for the election. Now, Stephens goes further. He talks about the degeneration of the Democrats, that the Democrats are no longer supported by working people, that the Democrats went from champions of free speech to promoters of speech codes and trigger warnings. And they went from questioning authority to offering and demanding unblinking fidelity to authority. And so we also see that the Republicans are viewed by many people as indifferent to the suffering of people, whether they're the elderly, the disabled, the young. The two parties represent the interests of the 1% at the top of the income brackets. Now, given that, what further indicates the potential for a change is that reality is destroying the narrative. Ukraine cannot win. You can send more weapons. You could even go to nuclear war, but that would end up destroying mankind. There's no way Ukraine is going to win against Russia. The economic decline of the West is accelerating. It's not just inflation. It's not just collapse of production, trade deficits, and so on. It's that the physical basis of replenishing what's needed to sustain life is not there. One of the areas where they're spending huge amounts of money, that is in weapons, many countries no longer possess the capability to turn out the weapons that they say are needed for the Ukraine war. If the military-industrial complex can't deliver armaments, what does that say about the rest of the economy? But the other point is that an alternative exists, even though they're trying to suppress it and cover it up, to make you think that the global South is somehow being bribed by the Chinese or intimidated by the Russians. What we're actually seeing is an anti-colonial rebellion of the global South against the neoliberal globalist economic policy. Now, what's needed to be an effective part of our campaign to defeat the global oligarchy and establish a new paradigm is for the citizens to become fluent in the discussion of this strategic situation and what the alternative is. And I'm linking two papers at the bottom of the description page for you to look at, read, and study. One is Lyndon LaRouche's article on trade without currencies from 2000. And the other is Helga Zepp-LaRouche's 10 Principles for a New Security and Development Architecture. What I want to do is have questions from you about these papers and about this progress toward a new paradigm for tomorrow's program, the Friday questions. So if you want to engage in the discussion, if you have ideas to share, questions to ask, send me an email at harleysch@gmail.com. Thanks. See you tomorrow. Hello, thanks for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our videos. Support our independence to produce videos like these. Become a member of the LaRouche organization at thelarouche.org/member. By becoming a member for $25 or more, you'll get special access to the EIR Alert Daily Briefing and Weekly Magazine, which is what I read to stay on top of things.